What looks like a haunted fortress rising from the ocean was once the most crowded place on Earth. Abandoned overnight, hidden from history. But beneath these broken walls lies the story of an empire built on coal, war, and silence. Why was it erased, and who doesn't want it remembered? In the late 1800s, Japan was transforming. After centuries of isolation, the country launched full speed into modernization, building factories, railways, and a military machine that could rival the West. But all that progress needed one thing: energy. Off the coast of Nagasaki in 1887, a coal seam was discovered beneath a barren, wave-battered rock called Hashima. At first, it was just a remote mining outpost. But 3 years later, Mitsubishi, yes, that Mitsubishi, took control. And they didn't just run the mine, they built a miniature city on the island itself. Miners, engineers, and their families began to arrive by boat. Over time, Hashima turned into a vertical concrete labyrinth, packed with apartments, schools, shops, even a movie theater, all crammed into an island just 16 acres wide. That's smaller than a city block in New York. By the 1950s, it had become the most densely populated place on Earth. Can you believe it? A rock in the middle of the ocean held over 5,000 people, more than many small towns. This wasn't just a workplace, it was a floating company town, engineered and owned entirely by Mitsubishi. Life on Hashima wasn't lived independently. It was managed, monitored, and molded by the corporation. Workers didn't just mine coal, they raised families in Mitsubishi-owned apartments, sent their children to Mitsubishi-run schools, and shopped at Mitsubishi-supplied markets. Even the electricity powering their homes and the food on their plates came from the company. From birth to death, Hashima residents lived inside a self-contained corporate bubble. Can you believe that? Every decision, every comfort, every hardship was tied to Mitsubishi's control. It wasn't just a job, it was total immersion. It sounds like science fiction, but it was very real, and it was only just the beginning. But what if decades later, the very survivors who were once silenced would return not with pickaxes, but with testimonies that shook the foundation of everything Japan tried to forget? Stick around, because what comes next isn't just history, it's a battle over memory, identity, and truth itself. As Japan industrialized, its ambitions grew bolder and darker. By the early 20th century, the country had transformed into a rising imperial power, hungry for resources and territory. Nationalism was on the rise, and so was Japan's military. Coal was the lifeblood of that expansion, and Hashima Island delivered it in spades. Its black rock-powered warships, trains, and steel mills. The deeper Japan plunged into war, the more it relied on Hashima's output. By the 1930s, Japan was invading its neighbors, Korea, China, and eventually much of Southeast Asia. And that's when Hashima's history took a sinister turn. To keep the coal flowing, Japan began importing labor, not voluntarily, but by force. Thousands of Koreans and Chinese were brought to Hashima under brutal conditions. They were unpaid, underfed, and forced to work in claustrophobic tunnels hundreds of meters below the ocean floor. Deaths were common. Escape was impossible. The island was surrounded by high walls and rough seas. And all of this was hidden in plain sight under the control of a major corporation. Isn't that crazy? A tech company we associate with cars and appliances today once ran what was essentially a floating prison for wartime labor. Then came 1945. In August, just 15 kilometers from Hashima, the US dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki. The shockwave could be seen from the island. While Hashima was spared physical destruction, the war's end changed everything. Japan surrendered, the empire collapsed, and with it the official end of forced labor on Hashima. But the coal didn't stop. Mitsubishi kept mining. The island continued to grow, and the story of what really happened there swept under the rug, buried deeper than the mine shafts themselves. Hashima had survived a world war, but the ghosts of that era, those who were silenced, those who were worked to death, never left. And decades later, they'd come back, demanding to be heard. After the war, Japan rose from the ashes with astonishing speed. The 1950s and 60s became known as the economic miracle, a period of rapid industrial growth, new technologies, and rising living standards. Hashima played its part. With coal still in demand, the island reached its peak. Over 5,000 people were packed onto just 16 acres, making it the most densely populated place on Earth. Life inside this concrete fortress was bizarrely self-contained. There were schools, rooftop gardens, a movie theatre, markets, even pachinko parlours. Children played in narrow alleyways between buildings. Families lived just steps from the mine shafts. It was noisy, it was gritty, but for many it was home. Can you believe it? A tiny slab of rock in the middle of the ocean had more people per square metre than Tokyo, Manhattan or Hong Kong. But everything changed in the blink of an eye. By the 1970s, oil had replaced coal. Mitsubishi, seeing the end, shut down the mine in 1974. Workers were told to pack up and leave fast. Within weeks, Hashima was empty, doors left open, furniture untouched. It was as if time had simply stopped, and what remained was a haunting skeleton of a vanished world. For decades, Hashima sat untouched, an eerie, crumbling monument to a forgotten era. Its once bustling concrete towers now stood hollow, their windows shattered like broken eyes staring out at the sea. Vines crept through classrooms, rust devoured stairwells, and entire rooftops caved under the weight of time. The island, once alive with the noise of drills and footsteps, fell into absolute silence, except for the whistle of wind and the crash of waves. Nature had begun its slow takeover, reclaiming every corner with salt, moss, and decay. It was as if the earth itself was trying to erase what had happened there. Then came the internet. Urban explorers and ghost town fanatics began sharing eerie photos online. Abandoned classrooms, rotting beds, and children's shoes left behind. Hashima wasn't just a forgotten island anymore. It was a mystery begging to be unraveled. In 2009, Japan allowed limited tourist access. Boats ferried in visitors curious to walk among the ruins. The island earned a new nickname, Gunkanjima, or Battleship Island, for its ominous silhouette. By 2015, Hashima was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site as part of Japan's Industrial Revolution landmarks. Isn't that crazy? A place once built on forced labour and secrecy, now celebrated by the global community. But that recognition came with controversy, because not everyone agreed on what part of the story should be told. When UNESCO granted Hashima World Heritage status in 2015, Japan celebrated the honour as a tribute to its industrial ingenuity. But across the sea, the mood was anything but festive. South Korea and China immediately objected. For them, Hashima wasn't just a marvel of engineering, it was a symbol of oppression. Survivors began to speak out. Elderly Korean and Chinese men, some in their 80s and 90s, stepped forward with painful memories. Starvation diets, brutal beatings, underground tunnels that felt like graves. Some recalled watching fellow workers collapse from exhaustion and never return. Many had been taken as teenagers, abducted or deceived with promises of good wages, and thrown into a living nightmare. Their message was clear. Hashima wasn't just a coal mine, it was a labour camp. Japan's government, facing mounting pressure, offered a vague acknowledgement. Officials admitted that some workers were brought against their will and forced to work under harsh conditions. But that was it. There was no formal apology, no admission of war crimes, no detailed education at the tourist site itself. Can you believe it? A country that built bullet trains and robotic pets couldn't bring itself to build a plaque that told the full truth. The backlash grew. Activists accused Japan of whitewashing history. Documentary filmmakers produced exposés using survivor interviews and declassified wartime documents. Historians from around the world pointed out the inconsistencies and the deliberate omissions. Right-wing political groups inside Japan fought back. They claimed the accounts were exaggerated or politically motivated. Some even argued that Japan had been a victim of the war, not a perpetrator. And so Hashima became more than an island. It became a battleground, not of coal and concrete, but of memory and morality. South Korea and China urged UNESCO to reconsider. They demanded that educational materials be added to the site, acknowledging the use of forced labor. Japan agreed, technically, but years later, when international observers visited the on-site museum, they found exhibits that glossed over the darker history. The language was passive, the suffering was blurred, the laborers were rendered faceless, almost invisible. The anger didn't fade. Instead, it became part of a larger regional rift. In diplomatic meetings, the ghosts of Hashima loomed large. Historical disputes frequently derailed conversations about trade and security. School textbooks became weapons of narrative. Even pop culture wasn't spared. Films and video games that featured Hashima were scrutinized for which version of the island they portrayed. And still, the survivors waited. Not for compensation, not even necessarily for justice, but for recognition. For someone, somewhere, to say, yes, this happened, and it mattered. Because history isn't about what we build. It's about what we choose to remember and what we try to forget. Hashima isn't just an abandoned island. It's a fossilized story, where ambition met agony, and concrete held more than just workers. It held secrets. Here, Japan's rapid rise collided with its darkest impulses. A place that once roared with machines and children's laughter now echoes with the silence of unresolved truth. It makes you wonder, can you believe an island barely the size of 15 football fields could carry the weight of an entire empire's rise and denial? Who gets to tell history, and who gets left out of the story? When you walk through ruins like these, or scroll through them on Google Street View, you're not just seeing decay, you're seeing choices. What was preserved, what was erased, what someone somewhere hoped you'd forget. So, next time you see a heritage sign, ask what's not being said. Because some of the most important truths aren't carved in stone, they're whispered through cracks. Stories like this one, messy, painful, uncomfortable, don't do well with algorithms. YouTube tends to favor the flashy, not the nuanced. And let's be real, videos about forced labor and historical denial don't exactly rake in ad revenue. And that's all about it. If you liked this video, please give a thumbs up, and if you like more updates, subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to click on the bell icon so you don't miss any videos and get notifications on time. Don't hesitate to give suggestions for our videos, and we'll see you in the next one.